What would you do if someone stood in your backyard every night and never moved? This is a story about Daniel, and this happened back in 2014 when he was living alone in a small rental house in rural Pennsylvania. Daniel had recently moved out of an apartment in the city after a breakup and wanted somewhere quiet and cheap. The house sat on a narrow lot with woods directly behind it. There were no nearby neighbors in that direction, just trees stretching out into darkness. The first night Daniel noticed something strange. He was up late getting water from the kitchen. As he glanced out the back window, he noticed a figure standing near the edge of his yard, right where the tree line began. The person wasn't moving. They weren't walking or pacing or looking around. They were just standing there. Daniel stood still, watching from the dark. After a short while, he convinced himself it was probably someone passing through the woods, or maybe even a trick of the light. When he checked again later, the yard was empty. He went to bed uneasy, but still rationalizing it away. The next night, Daniel saw the figure again. Same place, same posture. But this time, it felt closer. Over the following nights, the pattern continued. The figure only appeared late at night, always completely motionless, always facing the house. No matter how long Daniel watched, the person never reacted to light, sound, or movement inside the house. Each night, the distance between the figure and the house slowly closed. Daniel tried leaving lights on and even checked the yard during the day, but there were never any signs that someone had been there. No disturbed grass, no footprints, nothing. At one point, Daniel contacted local authorities, but a search of the yard and surrounding woods turned up nothing. With no evidence and no sightings during the day, there wasn't much they could do. That reassurance didn't last long. One night, Daniel stayed awake, watching from behind the curtains. When the figure appeared again, it was no longer near the trees. It was standing at the edge of the patio, close enough that Daniel could make out details he hadn't seen before. The person's posture looked rigid, unnatural. Their arms hung stiffly at their sides, and their head was tilted slightly upward, as if they were staring directly at the house. The figure remained there for a long time, and then, suddenly, it was gone. The next morning, Daniel found footprints in the damp grass. They came from the tree line and led straight to the back door. There were no footprints leading away. That was when Daniel decided to leave. He packed what he could and planned to stay somewhere else until he could officially move out. On his final night in the house, exhaustion finally caught up to him, and he fell asleep despite his fear. Sometime during the night, Daniel woke up to a faint sound, a soft tapping. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from his bedroom door. The sound was slow and deliberate, repeating over and over, like someone standing just on the other side, patiently waiting. Daniel stayed completely still until morning. He moved out shortly after and never returned to that house. To this day, he doesn't know who or what was standing in his backyard, only that whatever it was eventually stopped waiting outside. Most people think the scariest thing that can happen while driving is a crash. This is a story about Nathan, and this happened back in 2017 when he was working overnight delivery routes across the Midwest. Nathan's job involved driving long distances between warehouses, usually on rural highways that cut through farmland and small towns. He preferred the overnight routes because traffic was light and the roads were predictable. Most nights blended together, and nothing ever really happened. One night, while driving down a 2-lane highway surrounded by open fields, Nathan noticed headlights behind him. That by itself didn't stand out. What caught his attention was how steady they were. The headlights stayed far back, never gaining on him and never falling away. They didn't sway or drift the way most vehicles did on uneven rural roads. They simply stayed there, fixed in place. Nathan checked his mirrors a few times, then stopped thinking about it. After a long stretch of driving, He pulled into a small roadside rest area to stretch and walk around his truck. While he was parked, the headlights passed him on the highway without slowing down and disappeared into the darkness ahead. Nathan watched them go, then got back into his truck and continued his route. Later that night, as the road narrowed and the surrounding area grew darker, he noticed headlights behind him again. They were identical. As the night went on, the headlights kept returning. They would follow Nathan for miles, then vanish when the road dipped or curved. Each time they came back, they were positioned at the same distance behind his truck, as if nothing had changed. Nathan began paying closer attention. He adjusted his speed slightly. The headlights adjusted with him. He slowed down for a long stretch of road. The headlights remained exactly where they were. At one point, Nathan pulled onto the shoulder and waited. The headlights stopped behind him. They didn't pass. They didn't turn around. They simply stayed there, hovering in place on the empty road. Nathan waited until his unease outweighed his curiosity, then pulled back onto the highway. The headlights followed immediately. As the miles passed, Nathan noticed something that made his chest tighten. When reflective road signs caught the light behind him, there was no outline of a vehicle, no visible body or shape between the beams, just 2 points of light reflecting back at him. The longer he drove, the more isolated the road became. Fields stretched endlessly on both sides, broken only by fence lines, and the occasional dirt road disappearing into darkness. Nathan checked his mirrors again. The headlights were closer than before. Nathan exited the highway at the next opportunity and turned onto a narrow county road, hoping to put distance between himself and whatever was behind him. The headlights followed without hesitation. The road was darker, narrower, and completely empty. There were no houses, no farm lights, and no other vehicles. Only the sound of his engine and the steady glow behind him. Nathan slowed his truck. This time, the headlights didn't slow down. They continued forward and past him. As they moved alongside his truck, Nathan realized there was nothing there. No vehicle, no engine noise, no shape in the darkness. Just 2 headlights moving through the air at driving height. They continued ahead of him, drifting farther down the road until they slowly faded into the night. Nathan finished his route shaken but unharmed. The next morning, he reviewed his dashcam footage, expecting to see something he had missed. The video showed his truck driving alone down an empty highway. There were no headlights behind him, at any point. Nathan quit overnight routes shortly after that. To this day, he avoids rural highways after dark, knowing that whatever followed him that night didn't need a road to travel on. Most people think storage units are empty. This is a story about Lucas, and this happened back in 2016 when he was working as a night attendant at a self-storage facility in Arizona. The job was simple. Lucas worked alone overnight, monitoring the property, handling late access issues, and making sure no one was breaking in. The facility was large, with long rows of metal units and only a small office near the front gate. Most nights were silent. No customers. No movement. Part of Lucas's routine involved checking the security monitors. There were cameras covering the gate, the main drive lanes, and each long row of storage units. One night, while watching the screens, Lucas noticed something that didn't make sense. One of the units near the back of the property was open. That unit was supposed to be vacant. Lucas checked the log. No record of access. No gate code entry. No recent activity tied to that unit at all. On the monitor, the unit door was raised only part way. The interior was dark, but something inside was blocking the light from the overhead fixtures. Lucas assumed someone had broken in. He grabbed a flashlight and drove the golf cart toward the back rows. By the time he arrived, the unit door was closed. There were no signs of forced entry. Lucas told himself it was probably a camera glitch. Over the next few nights, the same unit kept appearing on the monitors. Sometimes the door was slightly open, sometimes it was closed, but something was always different about it. The shadow inside never matched the lighting. Even when the door was fully open, the interior appeared darker than it should have been, like the light was being absorbed rather than reflected. Lucas began checking the cameras more often. One night, while watching the feed, he noticed movement. Not the door. Something inside the unit shifted. The shadow pulled backward, deeper into the darkness. Lucas froze, staring at the screen. The movement was slow and deliberate, not like an animal and not like a person walking. It looked more like something adjusting itself in a cramped space. Lucas reviewed older footage. The unit had been appearing on camera for weeks. Sometimes the door would open on its own. Sometimes it would close. No one was ever visible entering or leaving. Eventually, Lucas decided to physically check the unit during daylight hours, when the property manager was present. When they opened it together, the unit was empty. No boxes, no furniture, no signs of anyone staying there. The interior walls were clean, but the floor showed scuff marks leading toward the back wall, as if something heavy had been dragged repeatedly into the same corner. The unit was locked again. That night, Lucas saw it open on the monitor, wider than before. As the weeks passed, Lucas noticed something worse. The shadow inside the unit began to look familiar. It was roughly human-shaped, but compressed, like it didn't fit the space it was in. The proportions were wrong. The shape bent at angles that didn't make sense. One night, Lucas realized the shadow was facing outward, toward the camera, toward him. On the monitor, the darkness inside the unit shifted forward slightly, stopping just before the threshold. Lucas noticed something else at the same time. Another camera feed flickered, then another. One by one, cameras near the back rows began cutting out, leaving only the feed pointed directly at the open unit. The shadow moved closer to the door, not stepping out, just leaning forward. Lucas stayed in the office until morning. When daylight came, the unit was closed again. The manager reviewed the footage. Most of it was gone, corrupted, except for one still frame saved automatically by the system. It showed the inside of the unit, fully lit. And pressed flat against the back wall was a distorted human-shaped impression, like something had been standing there for a very long time, slowly reshaping itself to fit. Lucas quit that week. The unit remains officially vacant, but employees still report it appearing open on the monitors at night. Always darker than it should be, always empty when checked, and always facing outward.